Sanibonani Mzansi. I am your host Candice Khumalo and I welcome you to another episode of the Health from Mzansi podcast. Today, we're exploring loneliness, a feeling that can creep into our lives even when surrounded by others. Joining me is psychologist Siphokazi Makubalo, who will delve into the shadows of loneliness, exploring its causes, the impact it has on our mental health, why it's become so common, and most importantly, how we can break the cycle.
My name is Siphokazi Makubalo and I am a counseling psychologist registered with HPCSA. I have been working mostly with students for 5 years now, and I recently just opened my own private practice. In my private practice, I have been working with diverse population, and that includes your adolescents, teenagers, young adults, as well as adults. I've been working with students for 5 years, both as a lecturer and as a psychologist. But soon I'm going to be venturing into something completely new as I'm going to start working for a rehabilitation center. Looking forward to that. That's basically who I am.
Congratulations on that milestone, Siphokazi, and thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Can you just start by mentioning and explaining some of the primary causes of loneliness?
So maybe before we get to that, we can just clarify something, because I've noticed that there's a lot of confusion between loneliness and what we call solitude. So loneliness is basically the people that feel a sense of emptiness and disconnection from other people. So these are the people that crave social connection or even a general connection with other people, but because of whatever mental problems or cognitive problems that they are experiencing, it then becomes hard for them to connect with other people. And then we have, on the other hand, the people that experience what we call solitude. Solitude would then be the positive side of loneliness. So these people are not necessarily lonely, but they just enjoy spending time on their own. So they enjoy their alone time, but they actually do have connection with people. So even though they isolate and they spend time by themselves, when they do crave connection, then they are able to go out and connect with other people. So today we're going to be speaking specifically about loneliness. And these are the people that will feel a sense of disconnect and a sense of emptiness inside because they are unable to connect with other people. So when we speak about the causes, there's no particular thing that causes loneliness. There's a range of things. An example that I can give is there's a child that will be feeling a sense of loneliness because they just moved to a new school. And then there is an adult that will be feeling a sense of loneliness because they just lost a loved one. So these two people are both experiencing loneliness, but then how you go about helping these people, particularly in a therapeutic setting, would be completely different because of the root cause. So now that we're talking about the causes, one of them would be if one has experienced a death of a loved one. So when you do experience a death, then that leaves that sense of emptiness, that craving to connect with that particular person, but that person is obviously not around. And then we have mental health disorders that also are causes of loneliness. And one of them is depression. So one of the primary symptoms of depression is a sense of isolation. So these people, you find that they isolate themselves so much from interacting with other people, and they will lock themselves inside the room and they avoid social connections by all means. So depression can be one of the symptoms of social isolation or even loneliness. So you are lonely because you're depressed, or you are depressed, and because you are depressed, you will then feel loneliness. And then there's other things that include poor social skills. So these are the people that, for whatever reason, it could be your childhood traumas, they have what we call poor social skills. So they are unable to connect with other people socially. And you'll find that other people have what we call social anxiety, which also could be as a result of childhood trauma. There's a lot of causes really, but most of them are related to mental health. So you find that the person is lonely because of underlying mental health problems. But also, I think the most important thing to note is that with people that experience loneliness, you can actually be lonely even though you are around other people.
Yeah.
So you can be lonely even though you are in a crowd. And that is why we then refer to loneliness as a state of the mind. So it's a state of feeling of emptiness within yourself that you can actually experience even if you are other people or even if you are in a crowd. And then there's people that will be indoors by themselves, but they're lonely because they do have those connections with people, and they know that if they crave a connection with a person, they can always reach out to those people. So I just thought that was important to also note that being alone doesn't always mean that you're lonely, but also being around people doesn't mean that you are not lonely.
Thank you so much for that informative explanation, Siphokazi. Can you just touch on how loneliness can affect different age groups, such as teenagers, young adults, or the elderly, especially now, as you mentioned, you're currently working with different population?
With teenagers, I think the most important thing to note is that teenagehood is one of the hardest stages that we have all gone through, and it's coupled by a lot of emotional turmoil. You find that at that age, teenagers become very impulsive. So one of the things that you can note that will be an impact of loneliness in a teenager is that they are going to engage in a lot of impulsive behavior, or what in psychology we call risky behavior. So these are the teenagers that will engage in a lot of smoking, excessive drinking, drug use, and they use the substances particularly to shy away or even to escape from that feeling of loneliness that they actually are experiencing. But another thing that you will note that will be an impact of loneliness in teenagers is what we call emotional blunting. So they disconnect so much from their emotions, which then will result to depression. So you find that emotionally, they really are not in a good space as a result of the loneliness, which then will result in depression. And they are not productive altogether. At school, you find that they're not productive. You find in classes that they're not attentive. And then when we move to young adults, we know that young adulthood is a period where now we're moving away from school, and some are in varsity, but some starting to go and navigate the workplace. And one of the things that you're going to notice is that there's some challenges that they're going to experience. So they're not able to connect with other people in a professional setting. And if you are required to go to an interview, they're not able to sell themselves the way that they're supposed to because they're unable to connect with other people. Some of the things that you find in teenagers as well, there's going to be a lot of impulsivity. That includes the excessive drinking, the excessive smoking, and they definitely feel very inadequate with themselves, and that is going to show mostly in their personality. So when you try to engage with these people, you're going to realize that there is a low self-esteem. So these can be some of the impacts that you're going to notice in young adulthood. And then when you go to elders, it's completely different. With elders, you'll find that, yes, again, there's going to be that isolation from other people, but these people tend to actually be exposed to elderly abuse because they're not constantly around people. They're always alone. So it's very easy for them to actually experience abuse in that regard, because we know that they are a very vulnerable population, especially in South Africa. There's been a lot of cases where elderly are being abused. But some of the impacts are cognitive impacts. So adults that actually isolate themselves, that feel lonely, they are at risk of developing cognitive disabilities like your dementia because of the reduced social interaction with other people. So there's differences, but between teenagers and young adulthood, there's not so much differences, but there's definitely more risk when you actually are an elder that is experiencing loneliness.
Siphokazi, what are some common signs that someone might be struggling with loneliness? And are there any particular life events or circumstances that can make people more vulnerable to loneliness that can lead to mental health struggles in the end?
Yes, there definitely are. One of them is, as I mentioned, death. So passing of a loved one becomes one of the major contributing factors. So if a person experiences a loss, then obviously they constantly crave a connection from that person. but that person is no longer there. And that can actually cause to loneliness. But another thing is, especially with teenagers or even adolescents, when you're now having to move from one place to another, or even moving provinces, or if even from one city to another, now adjusting to that different environment, your ability to connect with other people in that environment can actually be a very daunting experience that can actually result in the person actually isolating. And then depression, as I've mentioned. So depression is also one of the contributing factors, as well as another mental disorder, which we call anxiety. So these are the people that have social anxiety. And social anxiety can actually be one of the major contributing factors.
Siphokazi, can you just touch on some common signs that someone might be struggling with loneliness?
So some of the signs would be poor self-esteem. When you do notice that a person is experiencing poor self-esteem, that could actually be one of the signs that they are feeling lonely. But another would be emotional numbness. As I've said, that loneliness is more internal. It's more an internal thing that you feel. And because you are unable to connect with other people, then you will then experience being numb, emotional numbness, as a result of not connecting with other people or as a result of the loneliness. Another common sign is increased stress levels. Obviously, you're having no one to talk to because you're not connecting with other people. So you're having to deal with life stresses alone. And that actually results in increased stress levels. But some of the signs will be anxiety again. So anxiety will be a sign because a person that is experiencing loneliness, they are experiencing that loneliness because they're not connecting with other people. They avoid social situations. And as a result, then anxiety will be one of the common signs. But also, these people are going to feel lonely even when they're around other people. As I've mentioned, that loneliness will manifest itself even when the person is around people. So the minute you see that you are feeling lonely and you are around people, that could be one of the signs that you actually are experiencing loneliness. But also being constantly in your head. So these are the people that overthink and are constantly in your head, even when they are around other people. So being constantly in your head is also one of the common signs that the person could be experiencing loneliness, but also craving social connection, wanting to have more friends. That is a sign that with whatever connections that you have, you don't have genuine connections, basically. And because you don't have those genuine connections, you will be craving more friends, which could be a sign that you actually are experiencing what we call loneliness. So those are the few, but there's a lot of common signs, but those are the most prevalent ones.
In closing, what strategies or coping mechanisms can you share that individuals can adopt to manage feelings of loneliness before it leads to severe mental health issues?
As a mental health practitioner, the first thing that I would recommend is firstly being aware. So you need to recognize that you are lonely or you're feeling loneliness, and recognize that that loneliness is a sign that there's something that needs to be done. But also being patient enough with yourself and not allowing the change to happen overnight, but taking baby steps and taking smaller steps will actually help you to ultimately get to a point where you have overcome the loneliness. But one of the things that you can actually do is developing quality friendships. So it's quality over quantity. So instead of trying to have multiple friends, but have that one or two friends that you know that you have a genuine connection with, the people that you know that you can always go to when you seek connection. But also look at people that you have stuff in common with. So make sure that you seek friendships that share common values with you, common interests and common attitudes, as that will strengthen the connection that you are trying to build. But also try to be social and engaging in activities that you enjoy doing. So putting yourself out there, but not just doing anything, but doing the stuff that you know that you enjoy doing. So by doing that, then you're able to form connections with people in that setting, and that actually helps with the feeling of loneliness. But also working on your current relationships. If there's current relationships or friendships, and you don't feel particularly connected to those. So you can cultivate that connection in your current connections instead of going and starting new connections. If there is a chance for you to work on your current relationships, definitely do that. But if you feel like you can't work on your current connections for whatever reason, then definitely put yourself out there. Go and do stuff that you enjoy doing so that then you can be able to form new connections. But if you do all of that and you see that you're not achieving what you're trying to achieve, definitely reach out to somebody that you trust. And that could be a friend, a family member, before you can actually reach out to a therapist. But therapists are also available for you to help you navigate your feelings of loneliness and to equip you with the right strategies that you can actually employ to ensure that you deal with the feelings of loneliness.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of the Health from Zanzi podcast. To find out more about being the healthiest version of yourself, visit healthfromzanzi.co.za, or you can send us an email to hello@healthfromzanzi.co.za. This is the Health from Zanzi podcast, and your ears are always invited. As we wrap up this episode, Siphokazi's insights remind us that while loneliness can feel isolating, it can also serve as a powerful catalyst for self-discovery and connection. The key is recognizing it, reaching out, and taking small but meaningful steps to reconnect with others and ourselves. Whether it's deepening existing relationships, finding new communities, or seeking help when we need it, we have the power to change our experiences with loneliness. Stay healthy and fancy. I am your host, Candice Kumalo. Until next time.